Families notice it today in this digital culture. They'll notice that these things that were supposed to connect us are disconnecting us. Spending, cleaning, gambling, etc. Gambling is an interesting one. People think you're addicted to winning. Anybody gamble? Ever gamble? You've been okay, cool, or not cool, however you want to look at it. So, if you go to a casino, or in the Chicagoland area, there's riverboats and stuff like that. There are like two camps of people. I know there's more than that, but for the most part, there are two types of people. There are the newbies, and you can recognize them because they're loud and annoying. When they win, they cheer, they jump up and down. They're like, yay, I won, right? And whether they intend to or not, if they play long enough, they will change. And they will no longer get the pleasure out of gambling. Instead, it will be 99% about making it go away. It's an interesting thing about games of chance. They all have a delay in them, and it's intentional. As you're waiting for that card to flip or the thing to spin, looking for the jackpot, or the roulette wheel, it shuts down your brain as you focus on that. And when you shut down your brain and focus on that, you don't have to deal with it, whatever it is. And they change. And it's fascinating because there's another group of people. They're all along those machines or poker or whatever it is, blackjack. And they don't talk, do they? And their expressions are flat. And what's really fascinating, you ever watch a little 75-year-old woman hitting that button when she wins $5,000? She doesn't cheer. She just keeps clicking because she's not playing to win. That's the trap. The winning isn't the problem, or the losing isn't the problem. The avoidance is the issue. So it's just a different way of looking at it. Pornography gets a lot of guys in trap. In the beginning, it gives them a degree of pleasure. In the end, one after another, and their poor wife is like, what is so wrong with me? Which, of course, increases his anxiety, so then he runs in the bathroom and looks at a couple more to deal with her. Rationally, none of this makes sense. Emotionally, it makes perfect sense. Addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, situations, etc. So, I will give you a little bit of a way of looking at our lives. I'll look at my life through two different lenses. A classic disease model lens, and then an emotional model lens. And I'm not criticizing disease model. Disease model came about and, it's been diagnosed as disease, all this stuff. So, we'll give it a disease model. So we'll count the drinks in my family system and see where I came from. Okay? So we'll start with my mom. My mom was, in my family, drinking was pretty common. We were a family of drinkers. We drank. Drinking was socially acceptable. There was a lot of drinking. My mom was a bartender and a waitress. My dad drank. My grandmother drank. We were part Irish. We just drank. We drank. And it was assumed that I would drink as well. So my mother, she liked to go out on the weekends and dance and have a few drinks. She was probably at the pleasure stage where it made her more outgoing, and she liked to turn things up to 11 a little bit. She liked the energy and magic of a party and a bar and the dancing. There's an energy that exists, and she loved it. And she met my dad in a bar, and they met in a bar, and they drank together and partied together a little bit, and then they got married. And the fight started almost right away because she liked to go out. But my dad, being a combat veteran, if you experience a lot of trauma, you will rapidly go to the make it go away stage. And he was already there probably by 20 years old. And my dad drank to make it go away. There was no blissful look of I'm having a good old time. Even people back then that knew him would say, why are you doing this to yourself, right? And he drank to make it go away. My dad says later, if you knew my dad, as he got older, if he was drinking in a bar, he was either fighting or crying, which apparently is not that cool. Don't drink with my dad. And so they would fight about, my mom would say, let's go out. My dad would say, why can't we just stay home? Let's go out. We were out last Friday. Can we just stay home? And the fights kind of began. And little fights, new couple, financial ups and downs, and they drank and they didn't drink, and they drank and they didn't drink, and things like that. they came up with an awesome idea, since they were having such arguments, is let's have 2 kids to fix the problems in our relationship, which anybody that's had kids knows that it just adds a little fuel to the fire, and their arguments increased a little bit, and when we were 6 years old, I think they split up. My mom became the single mom, struggling to raise 2 kids. She became a bartender and a waitress, making a whopping $201 an hour plus tips, struggling to pay for these 2 kids. And she did relish when she could go out and have a few drinks with her friends, maybe get a babysitter to cover, things like that. When I was about 11 or 12, she met my stepdad, who, he had a really cool job. He had the kind of job where you could kind of drink sometimes with your clients at lunchtime, which I think is a pretty cool job. Actually, it's not such a cool job, but it used to be a cool job. And he would drink sometimes too much, and they got married together, and they tried to build a life, but there's a lot of stress with 2 blended kind of families, and you inherit this. And they argued a lot, and there was a lot of drinking and some fighting and things like that, and just some really, really rocky times. When I was a teenager, we were allowed to drink in my home, which sounds sacrilegious to people today. But back then, my mother looked at it real simple, is that I'd rather have you drink here, because I had some friends in high school, David, who went out and died, and they drank, and they got in car wrecks. And I'd rather you were here drinking than I know you're going to do it anyway. So there were some rules, which is, if you're away and drink too much, just call us. So drinking was okay in my family. We had beer in the fridge. As a 16-year-old, God forbid. And there were issues, and there were some DUIs in my family, and there were drinks and fights. And there was a lot of alcohol. My grandmother once told me, David, in our family, a man is defined by his drink. You're a Scotch man or this kind of man. And she said, I'll bet you're going to be a Manhattan kind of guy. I am not a Manhattan kind of guy. I did not become a Manhattan guy. I don't even know what it is to this day. Thank God I did not become a man. Can you see me at my first high school party? Pardon me, could I get a martini, beer? Then vodka. Then vodka and cocaine became my drink of choice. So, in my family, drinking was a big part of who we were, and it was our life. And it was just the way that it was. And it's easy to kind of look at that and blame the drinking for me. But I'm going to cross that way of looking at it. And we're going to look at it through a different lens, an emotional lens. Let's not count the drinks in my family. Let's count the unopened bills. Let me suggest that my family wasn't addicted to drinking, that they were addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, situations. In my family, we didn't sit together at dinner time and process our day. How was your day? If I had a bad day or a good day, we just kind of floated along and kind of dealt with things as they came. And I don't want to give you the impression that they were drinking and partying every day. There were periods it was bad, there's periods it was awesome, but for the most part, my family shouldn't be judged by their worst moments, and nor should your family. And for the most part, they were people that were trying to do the best they could with what they had and trying to give their kids a better life. My family was addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, situations, etc. Let me ask you guys a question in my family, from what little you know of what I've said so far. There were times when they first got married that there were some fights, some uncomfortable fights, some yelling and some screaming. My mom would pack us up and take us away and stuff like that. So it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I haven't gotten much sleep. I get 4 hours of sleep. I wake up for high school and I'm dreary-eyed and stuff bleary-eyed. Let me ask you a question. Do you think in my family, we sat down later that day to process what had just happened, the fights and the name-calling, take accountability and apologize? Or do you think option B, we acted as if it had never happened, which is B? And it's an awesome avoidance coping strategy. It does really wonders. It creates some problems, and it can be a little bit annoying when you run into somebody that has that issue. They do some big old outburst on a Saturday, and you want to talk to them on Tuesday about what the heck they did. And they're like, what do you want me to say? That was yesterday. That was the past. Why are you always bringing up the past? I don't want to deal with that right now. And in my family, I inherited that avoidance coping. And it's awesome in the emotional arena, but does create some problems. Avoidance coping isn't good or bad. If you're in balance, it can be pretty okay. But it was a little bit strange because, there were times like in my relationships early on, I'm 21 years old and I'm in an abusive kind of, we're kicking and screaming and calling, that kind of stuff. And she had the same thing. We would wake up the next morning as if it had never happened. And then I dated this one gal and she didn't have that. And we got in a big old fight and I said some things I probably shouldn't have and whatever in a heat of an argument. We woke up the next day and she was still mad. And I go, what are you still mad for? And she goes, I can't believe you called me the name. And I go, well, we were fighting. And the next day she was still mad. And the third day she was still mad. Weirdest thing in the world. What do you want me to do about it? It was yesterday. So my family has their avoidance coping, but if you only count the drinks, you're going to miss it. So in this story, we're not going to count the drinks. I'm going to give you a way of looking at my life on how I became addicted to avoiding before I ever picked up my first drink. Okay? So when I was 10 years old, you notice I got glasses. They're actually pretty thick, but thanks to technology, they're thinner than they used to be. In the 70s growing up, there were two things you did not want to be. One was braces. You didn't want to have braces, brace face, because it was like this big contraption, right? And the second was 4 eyes with glasses, because they were not cool, okay? So there were two things. I didn't know how bad my eyes were. I just knew that I couldn't see very well. You guys are blurry. I don't even know if you're sleeping or male or female. Like, you're really blurry to me. I can't see crap. I really can't. And I couldn't see, and I was embarrassed about it. I knew there was something wrong, so I hid it. And I got away with it up until I was about 10 or 11 or 12 years, maybe to about 12 years old. I don't know how I got away with it. I don't know how the nurse didn't catch me in school. I used to sit in the front row, and when the teacher would turn their back, I would squint and write down what was on the board. My social skills didn't develop in the ways that a lot of people do, because when you're a blind kid, like, I can't see. You guys are a blur. I don't know if you're mad at me. I don't know if you're giving me a good look or a bad look. My responses, so I had high social anxiety. Really high social anxiety. Later, when I did get glasses, I couldn't look people in the eye. I had my one friend's father used to make me sit in a chair, and he'd say, you can't look people in the eye, kid. You're going to practice with me, which does wonders for a kid with social anxiety, by the way. Oh, thank you, sir. I had high social anxiety, super high. You couldn't, it was horrible. I tried to join some sports, which I think for a blind kid, I was pretty badass. I haven't hit a ball or caught one. I probably could now, but I'd whiff out, and I joined baseball for about a week and quit that, and basketball. And basketball is really embarrassing because I remember thinking I would get it in the thing, and I go, yeah, and everybody like, you loser. So I tried every sport for like a minute, and I quit. My brother was popular and good at sports, and I just wasn't. So everything is blurry, and everything is blurry, but right there it's not. My comfort zone, where I can see things clearly, is about 2 feet in front of me. And one of the first loves of my life that I developed is reading. And reading isn't bad. I latched on to reading with both hands. And I, at 10 years old, had a library card, and I would walk to the library, and you could get 10 books for free. We were kind of a poor family, so like, this was a big deal. And I would read them, and I could read a book a day, even at the age of 10. I was a little nerdy kid. And everybody said, look at how smart that kid is. Reads a book a day. He's going to go places. Smart. They didn't ask, what the hell is that 10-year-old doing on a summer day in the corner with the book in hand when he should be out there? They knew I was kind of a weird kid. My dad describes me as a weird, I don't know what to do with you. He says, you were either reading, or when you stayed at my house, because they split up, you would go in the basement and work on models, which is interesting, because you can paint, and I can see really clear when it's up close. He said, but we would invite you to go play catch, and you just wouldn't, and we just got sick of asking. You were just kind of weird kid my dad had this unfinished like stone basement with a boiler and like a single bare bulb and an AM radio, and I work on my house. I was like a serial killer gonna be. I mean, there's no way. The picture of that, like when the FBI shows up, they're like, yep, serial killer kid. So I was just a weird kid. And what it was is I had high social anxiety on everything outside of 1 feet away. And the books that I read were awesome. And the social anxiety that I felt would go away. No matter what was going on, the school was weird or this or that, little stressors. You know, what was I running away from or avoiding? Nothing. I don't know, being 10, being 11, being 12. But the books I read were really cool because I got to be not me. And they were always the same. They were these fantasy and science fiction books, and they always had kind of the same plot. They were like little poor farm boy learns magic and slays the dragon, you know, becomes a king. Or little poor farm boy becomes a space pirate and saves the universe. And when I got to read, this went away. And I got to be somebody else. And it was awesome. It was a cool thing. And everybody thought how smart I was, and nobody asked what the hell am I avoiding. I'm not here to say I'm a book addict. Avoidance coping isn't good or bad. But I want you to see how my life progresses from a few simple things into almost 100% avoidance coping 24 hours a day.